Okay, so here we are at the calculator, and I realize that most of us have not been trained in the sciences, but I do believe that this is not too difficult for the average person to understand. I really don't believe that it's too, in fact, I believe a seventh grader could go through this. What we're going to do is to do the day count between the two upcoming fall feasts of Israel in certain 7-year spans of 86 moons. 87 moons is not going to work. So about half the time it's 86 moons. And we're going to show that, well, we can measure it by measuring the days, 365.2422 days, or we can measure it according to the synodic months or the lunar cycles, new moon to new moon, which is what we're going to discover today. So we're going to do the lunar measurement of the day count between Yom Teruah, the Feast of Trumpets, and Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, Judgment Day, 7 years later. And we're going to make an interesting discovery. And again, I do believe that a seventh grader can do this calculation and draw the appropriate conclusion. And this is not rocket science. This is something that the saints of God Most High are capable of looking at, even in this day in which STEM subjects, science, technology, mathematics are being dumped and truth is being thrown to the ground. I do believe that there are people out there who are faithful in realms of truth and are not slip sliding all over the place when it comes to truth. This can be extremely upsetting to me to see people slip sliding and shimmying around in matters of truth. This is absolutely pure truth that we're going to present today, and it's not to be fobbed off. So we're going to go and we're going to measure the day count between Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur, or Feast of Trumpets, Day of Atonement, 7 years later, in those time spans up ahead that see 86 moons and not 87 moons. So that being the case, we're looking at 86 times the synodic month, and that synodic month is, and let's go through here, and I want you to follow and to notice that we're doing things in a way that you can repeat afterwards and assure for yourself that this is correct. So we take the synodic month of 29.53058 days. That is what the synodic month is now. Does God know all about that? Yes, he does. He knows all about that. He knows where we are in our time. He knows what the lunar cycle is. That lunar cycle that you see right in front of you now is not the same lunar cycle as it was 2,000 years ago. It's different because the moon is moving away from the Earth and the lunar cycle is slowing down. So that's why the Jewish calendar is jumping out of cogs right now, because back in the days of Hillel II, back in 359, when he put together the Jewish calendar, matched it up with the 7-day calendar of Constantine, he saw the Metonic cycle match up very nicely between 19 solar years and the 12 times 19 plus 7, 235 lunar synodic months. almost a perfect match back 2,000 years ago. That was how he was able to set up forth the calendar. But now this number you see here in front of you is bigger than the number that matched the lunar cycles back in the days when Meton of Athens, about 400 BC, he noticed that there was such a wonderful similarity between 19 years and 235 moons. So there's an extra 7 moons jammed into the 19-year Metonic cycle back then. This number you see in front of you today is not the same as that number because it's bigger. Does God know about it? Yes, he does. So we're going to measure out what God wants to present to us, I do believe, about the latter days that nobody seems to be noticing because they haven't done their homework. And this, again, is something that is not too difficult. Once it's pointed out to you, a 7th grader could do this. So here we go with, this is the lunar cycle, such as we have today, between new moon to new moon. And we are going to measure out 86 of those right now. So all we do is we look at that number and then we multiply by 86. And we get, I'm sorry. Let me do that again. 29.530588 days in a lunar month. We multiply by 86 and we get that number, which 2,539.6. We round it off to the day and it's 2540 days. 2540 days. Now, that's the distance, that's the day count. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That is the time span between Tishri 1 of a given year and Tishri 1 7 years later. So we're going from Feast of Trumpets to Feast of Trumpets 7 years apart. And that's the number of days between the two. Now, we want to go from Tishri 1, Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah, to the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, 7 years later, which is Tishri 1 to Tishri 10. So we have to add another 9 days. So let's add the other 9 days. And that equals 2549. So from day 1, the time span between Tishri 1 and Tishri 10, 7 years later, is 2,549 days. So if we begin at day 1 and we add this 2,549 days, we get this. We begin with day 1 and then we add 2,549 days and we get 2,550 days for the inclusive day count between Tishri 1 and Tishri 10, 7 years later. Okay, just take a picture of that number in your mind. Don't ever, ever forget it. 2,550 days for the inclusive day count between Tishri 1 and Tishri 10 in certain 7-year spans in the future that see 86 moons. Those 7-year spans would be 2025 to 2032 and 2030 to 2037. And of course, there'd be other days after that as well, time spans after that as well. Now we're going to notice something else very, very interesting. That 2,550 days is a very special day count. Now, it could be plus or minus 1 day on that. That would depend on the vagaries of the new moon sightings. So we're going to have to be more specific than that, but nevertheless, this is extremely intriguing, isn't it? Because what we're looking at here is the future 70th week of Daniel plus something that adds up to this number. So the future 70th week of Daniel, as we've discussed previously, is 7 times 360, 2520. Now, that would be the length of the future 70th week. Does it account for the whole of the final 7 years of the age? No, it does not. And we're going to explain that in a minute. But let's look at that number now and make another little calculation. If that is a future 70th week, and the Holy One of Israel talks about the midpoint of the 70th week, he's talking about the midpoint of a chunk of time that we have no right to chop and throw away the first half. We have no right to do that. The hemi-preterists are doing that, and it is a huge new assault against the work of Sir Robert Anderson in showing that this future 70th week of 2,520 days, when you divide it by 2, which we'll do now, equals 1260 days. Flip open to Revelation chapter 12, verse 6, and you will see that number, 1260 days. That represents the day count for the 2 halves of the future 70th week of Daniel. Does that represent the whole of the final 7 years? No, it does not, because of what Jesus said in the Olivet Discourse. He said, the sun shall turn to darkness, the moon to blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord comes. I'm sorry, that's what Joel said. Jesus said, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will turn to darkness, the moon to blood, and the stars will fall. So Jesus and Joel are telling us that there's a period of cosmic signs. And now if we go to Daniel, chapter 12, verse 11, we will see mention of 1,290 days between the abomination of desolation and the end of the age. So what we're looking at now, if we measure out the full length of the final 7 years, is 1260 days for the first half. And then we add the 1290 days spoken of by the angel Gabriel to Daniel in Daniel 12:11. And what number do we get? Are you getting this yet? And if we fine-tune our lunar calculation, and we're able to look at when the new moon is likely to be seen in future years, and measure out the day counts between Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur in future 7-year spans, we'll get repeatedly this 2,550 day time span. Imagine, if you will, walking a mile, putting 1 foot in front of another for half of that time period. We'd end up with about that number of footsteps. Imagine being 1 over or 1 under and saying, oh, oops, that's not right. It's got to be exactly 2,550 days. And that is the number of days between Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur in future time day counts. That would represent the final 7 years of the age. For us to ignore that, and for us to join the dominionists and apostles and prophets who imagine that they're just going to do a cakewalk right through to the end of the age without any problems with Israel or future 70th week or anything like that. They know that they can't chop the whole 70th week away, but they sure as heck are going to try to chop the first half away, aren't they? And why? Because that's where they sit in the wings right now and coexist. The harlot church of Revelation 17 is getting ready to come on stage. She is primping backstage right now, ready to come on the stage, and we're not telling the story. Oh yes, Klaus Schwab can talk about the Great Reset, terrorize the saints, and they don't know what the dickens is going on. Meanwhile, we're not doing our homework. And when we are doing our homework, we've got naysayers coming on saying that this is a bunch of junk, or that Sir Robert Anderson was all wet. Brothers and sisters, we've got to do better than this. We've got to do better than this. And now you've seen the calculation. The final 7 years of this age is a day count of 2,550 days, bridging inclusively Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur for the final 7 years of the age. And to deny it, well, you can deny it, but present your chronology of the 70 weeks prophecy. And if you can't present your future chronology of the 70 weeks prophecy, shut up or put up. I'm sorry to be a little brusque. I've had this information up for nearly 20 years and nobody's paying any attention. And here we've got God's holy people being terrorized by being told that, oh yes, the World Economic Forum is in charge of holy history. God is not in charge, and his sovereign will, his sovereign purposes are being totally ignored. This is nuts. This is unsatisfactory, and we've got to do better than this. It's time for us to do what we need to do, say what we need to say, come what may. We know that we're all in trouble, so it doesn't make any difference if we go out and share these things. It doesn't make any difference at all. So that being the case, I would say God bless all of you. Grace and shalom to all of you. And please remember what you heard today.